You ever notice how people love to walk past the very thing that could save them? They see the warning signs, feel that little sting in their chest, hear that whisper in the back of their mind, and still pretend everything is fine. It's almost funny, really, how humans convince themselves that danger disappears just because they decide to look the other way. But there's always a price for ignoring what matters. Always. The universe has a strange sense of humor. It gives you hints, nudges, little shocks, hoping you'll wake up before it's too late. And when you don't, well, let's just say the consequences tend to come in waves you never saw come. And right now, you're standing in that moment, the one people regret for the rest of their lives. That crossroads where a single choice decides whether you rise or break. Ignore this, and you'll feel it later. Not as a tap on the shoulder, but as a flood that hits you when you're weakest. Funny thing is, deep down, you already know what I'm talking about. That ache in your gut, that pull in your mind, that sense that something important is shifting, and if you let it slip, you'll pay with more tears than you ever thought you had. Funny thing about warnings, they never arrive dressed like disasters. They don't kick down your door. They don't scream in your face. They don't come with flashing red lights telling you to run or fight. No. They come quietly, softly, almost politely. A little thought that drifts into your mind at the most inconvenient time. A feeling in your chest that says, something's off. A twist in your stomach that whispers, don't ignore this. But people have mastered the art of pretending not to hear what their own soul is begging them to pay attention to. They brush off the signs, call them stress, call them overthinking, call them anything but truth, because truth demands action, and action demands courage, and courage demands that you finally stop lying to yourself. And most people, they'd rather stay comfortable in the dark than face the fire waiting in the light. You know what makes it all so strange? Every person who ends up broken, shattered, crying over something they could have prevented, they all say the same thing. I knew. I felt it. I should have listened. It's almost poetic how the heart warns you long before the world does. How your instincts tug at your sleeve, hoping you'll turn around before the cliff shows up in front of you. Your inner warning isn't some mystical drama. It's survival. It's wisdom. It's a voice inside you built from every painful moment you've lived through, every betrayal, every disappointment, every scar you collected while pretending nothing was wrong. That voice learned to speak from experience. And when it speaks now, it's trying to save you from repeating the same disaster wrapped in a new disguise. But you keep walking like you're immune to collapse. Like nothing could possibly go wrong if you just stay calm enough, quiet enough, blind enough, as if life will reward you for ignorance, as if problems disappear simply because you don't want to look at them. And while you pretend everything is fine, the danger grows teeth behind your back, watching, waiting, sharpening itself in silence. Then comes the moment, that inevitable moment when everything snaps. The truth you ignored becomes the truth that hits you with full force. No warning anymore, no whisper, only impact. And suddenly you're drowning in consequences you could have avoided with one brave moment, one honest decision, one pause where you actually listened to the voice inside you instead of silencing it like an inconvenience. You know what hurts people the most? Not the event itself. Oh no. It's the memory of the moment they felt that first tiny warning and walked past it anyway. That regret is heavier than any failure. It clings to you, follows you, sinks its claws into every thought you have afterward. You can escape danger, but regret, that one stays. That one remembers. That one bites. Your inner warning doesn't care about ego or pride or excuses. It doesn't argue. It doesn't force. It simply tells you, pay attention. And the tragedy is that most people only understand its value when they're picking up the pieces of the mess they created by ignoring it. They cry, they break, they say it was fate or bad luck, when deep down they know it was a choice to turn away, a choice to mute the signal, a choice to pretend nothing was wrong when everything was screaming for their attention. Life doesn't punish you for listening. Life punishes you for pretending you didn't hear. That small discomfort you feel now, it's a warning, a gift, a chance to stop the storm before it forms. But if you keep brushing it aside, stuffing it down, convincing yourself it doesn't matter, eventually that little whisper becomes something else, something bigger, something far less forgiving. And when that happens, it won't tap you on the shoulder anymore. It will break you open in ways you never thought possible. All because you looked away from the very thing that could have saved you when it was still small enough to handle. It's funny how people think they're escaping pain by dodging it, as if looking away somehow rewrites the consequences, as if silence stops the clock. They convince themselves that avoiding the hard decision, the uncomfortable truth, the confrontation they don't want to face, is some kind of victory. Like if they just pretend long enough, the problem will get tired and walk away. But pain doesn't leave. Pain waits. Pain takes notes. Pain grows teeth in the dark, feeding on every moment you refuse to deal with it. The pain you dodge today doesn't disappear. It transforms. It turns into something bigger, something heavier, something that doesn't knock on your door, it kicks it in. And by the time it finally arrives, it's no longer the small ache you could have handled. No. It becomes the kind of pain that bends people, breaks people, the kind that shows up when you have the least strength to fight it. You ever notice how life whispers first? A tiny discomfort, a little pressure, something feels off but not urgent enough for you to act. That's the warning. That's the moment when pain is still kind, when it still gives you options, when you can still do something about it without everything falling apart. But people love to ignore whispers, because whispers don't scare them. They only listen when life starts raising its voice. And by then, it's far too late to pretend you didn't hear the first message. Let me tell you a secret most people never want to admit. The pain you feel tomorrow is not fate. It's procrastination. It's avoidance. It's every moment you chose comfort over growth. Every time you said, I'll deal with it later, and later became the avalanche you can't outrun. Because pain delayed becomes pain multiplied. It grows layers, roots, claws. It spreads into everything, your sleep, your confidence, your future. One decision postponed turns into 100 consequences, waiting to strike when you're weakest. And the cruelest part? You always know. You always feel that early warning, that pull inside your chest telling you that if you don't move now, you'll suffer later. People can lie to everyone else about not knowing, but they can't lie to themselves. Deep down, they felt it, that tension, that uneasiness, that instinct whispering, handle this before it handles you. But the mind is a master at running from its own truth. It's easier to scroll, easier to laugh, easier to distract yourself than it is to face the one thing that scares you. The pain you avoid today is patient. It's polite. It lets you think you got away with it. Days pass, weeks pass, maybe, even months where everything feels fine. And then, without warning, it hits. A breakdown, a loss, a collapse you never saw coming, except you did. You saw the signs long before it happened, you just chose comfort over honesty. People always choose comfort first, until comfort becomes the very thing that destroys them. What most people never understand is that pain doesn't want to punish you. Pain only steps in when you refuse to learn any other way. It becomes the teacher you forced into existence by ignoring all the others. And this teacher doesn't use gentle reminders. It uses consequences. And consequences don't negotiate. They don't care about excuses, intentions, or how scared you were. They only care that you refused to act when action was still possible. You can't run from pain. There is no corner of your mind quiet enough, no distraction loud enough, no denial strong enough to hide you forever. Pain knows your name. Pain remembers your choices, and it always returns bigger, louder, harder if you push it away. Imagine trying to outrun your own shadow. That's what avoidance looks like. No matter how fast you go, it follows. And the more you pretend it's not there, the darker it becomes. The truth is brutally simple. The pain you handle today is a bruise. The pain you avoid becomes a lifetime wound. The small discomfort you face now becomes strength. The small discomfort you run from becomes the very thing that tears you apart later. And when that moment comes, when the pain you refuse to face finally demands your attention, it won't ask politely. It won't whisper anymore. It will take everything it needs from you all at once, not because life is cruel, but because you ignored the warning while the pain was still small enough to carry. Instead of letting it grow into something that ends up carrying you in chains, you built yourself. Life has this strange little habit of being generous with. It's warnings. Not loud. Warnings. No, that would be too easy. It prefers to whisper. A faint tug at your thoughts. A moment where your heart stumbles for no reason. A quiet shift in the air that makes you pause even though nothing around you has changed. That's how life speaks first. Softly, gently, almost politely. It gives you every chance to wake up before it has to get serious. But people only respond to screams. They wait until everything is falling apart, until the ground is cracking beneath their feet, until the damage is too loud to ignore. It's almost tragic, almost funny, how humans demand disaster before they're willing to admit the truth they already knew deep down. Because life always whispers before it screams. It always gives you a chance to listen before it decides to teach you the hard way. Think back to every moment you broke, every moment you cried, every moment you felt the world collapsing around you. If you replay those memories, you'll find something interesting, hiding in the beginning. A moment, small, subtle, where something didn't feel right, where a part of you tried to get your attention. Maybe it was a strange silence in your mind. Maybe it was a gut feeling. Maybe it was an uneasiness you didn't want to acknowledge. That was the whisper, and you felt it. You always do, but you brushed it off. You convinced yourself it didn't matter. You told yourself you were overthinking, being dramatic, seeing things that weren't there. You pretended everything was normal because normal is safe, normal is easy, normal doesn't require courage. And so you ignored the whisper, and life noticed. Life keeps track of silence. When you don't listen, it doesn't get angry, it gets louder. The whisper becomes pressure. The pressure becomes discomfort. The discomfort becomes chaos. And suddenly the thing you could have dealt with quietly becomes a storm tearing through your life without mercy. Not because the universe hates you, but because you forced it to raise its voice. That's how screaming works. It's the last resort after every other signal has been ignored. And the twisted part is this: the whisper is always enough. It always gives you enough information to make the right choice, to save yourself from the disaster waiting ahead. But humans aren't wired for whispers. They're wired for panic. They want proof before they act, and by the time proof arrives, it comes in the form of regret, heartbreak, consequences that don't care how sorry you are. You know what makes the whisper so dangerous? It's quiet enough to deny, but sharp enough to haunt you afterward. When everything collapses, you'll remember that moment, that tiny, insignificant moment where you felt something shifting. And that memory will sting worse than the actual pain. Because you'll know you could have stopped the scream. You could have prevented the fall. You could have changed the entire story if you just listened when it was still easy. Life isn't cruel. It's just honest. It doesn't sugarcoat warnings. It doesn't repeat itself forever. It tests how badly you want the life you claim to deserve. The whisper is the test. The scream is the consequence. And consequences, they don't negotiate. They don't care about your excuses, your fear, your confusion. They only care that you ignored the truth when it was gentle. You ever wonder why the whisper feels so personal? Why it hits you in the places nobody else can see? Because it comes from inside you. From the part of you that knows what's coming long before your mind catches up. Your instincts aren't random. They're ancient. They're wise. They've survived every mistake you've ever made, every hurt you've ever endured. And when they whisper, it's not superstition. It's memory. It's protection. It's a warning crafted from every scar you carry, and you silence it over and over again until it has no choice but to scream through consequences instead of emotions. Life whispers before it screams because it wants to give you a chance. It wants you to wake up. It wants you to act before the damage begins. But if you ignore the whisper long enough, the scream becomes unavoidable. And when that moment arrives, it won't be gentle. It won't be quiet. It won't be patient. It will be the flood that washes away everything you thought you could take for granted. All because you didn't listen when life was still whispering to you in the dark, giving you one last chance to save yourself before it showed you what happens when whispers are no longer enough. Hesitation is such a tiny thing, isn't it? Just a pause, a breath, a moment where you tell yourself you're thinking, when really you're hiding. People love to dress hesitation up as caution, wisdom, maturity. They convince themselves that standing still is safer than moving. But they never look closely enough to realize what hesitation actually is. It's the doorway to regret, the quiet one, the one you step through without even noticing until it locks behind you and refuses to open again. You know that feeling you get right before you're supposed to make a decision? That tightening in your chest, that tick in your mind, that strange silence inside your thoughts. That's the moment that defines everything. That tiny flicker of time where life waits to see whether you'll act or freeze. And most people, they freeze. Not because they're incapable, but because they're afraid of choosing wrong. They don't know that not choosing is the worst choice of all. It's almost funny how hesitation tricks you. It whispers, wait a little longer, think more. You're not ready, and you believe it because it feels safer. But hesitation is a thief dressed in reassurance. Every second you stall, it steals something from you. Your chance, your momentum, your confidence, your future. And the scariest part is that you don't realize what you've lost until you're staring at the life you could have had, watching it fade like fog in the morning air. People don't regret failure. They regret the moments they hesitated, the moments they knew exactly what they needed to do but stood still anyway. Those moments grow teeth. They don't stay small. They come back at night when everything is quiet. They sit beside you years later, laughing softly in your ear, reminding you that you could have had everything if you just moved a little sooner. Hesitation makes you believe that time is on your side. That life will wait for you to get comfortable, get confident, get brave. It won't. Time is not patient. Opportunities are not patient. They appear, they glow for a moment, and then they vanish without apology. Nothing waits, nothing pauses, nothing comes back the same way twice. That's the trick hesitation plays on you. It makes you think you have more time than you actually do. And here's the truth most people choke on. The moment you hesitate is the moment someone else takes the chance that was meant for you. The world doesn't leave spaces empty. It doesn't hold your place while you work up the courage to step forward. The life you want, the one you dream about, the one you tell yourself you're working on. Somebody else is already reaching for it while you're standing still, trying to calm your nerves. Hesitation kills more dreams than failure ever will. Failure at least moves you, teaches you, shapes you. But hesitation, it does nothing but drain you slowly, quietly. It's the poison that tastes like safety, the delay that feels harmless until it's not. And when the moment passes, when the opportunity is gone, when the person walks away, when the door closes for good, that's when you feel it. That slow, heavy ache in your chest. The realization that your life didn't fall apart. You just didn't build it when you had the chance. You see, regret doesn't appear all at once. It builds, it grows, it waits for the perfect moment to strike. And when it does, it hits harder than any mistake ever could. Because it carries a truth that no one likes to face. You were capable. You were ready. You just didn't move. And now you have to live with a memory of what might have been, replaying itself over and over in your mind like a scene you can't rewrite. Hesitation is the quiet betrayal, the one you commit against yourself without noticing. You stand on the edge of something important, something life-changing, something meant for you, and you step back, not because you lack ability, but because you lack belief. Not because you aren't prepared, but because you don't trust your own strength. That moment, that single moment, becomes the root of every regret that follows. You tell yourself later. You tell yourself someday. But someday never arrives for those who hesitate. It only arrives for those who leap while their fear is still screaming. And the cruel part is, life doesn't remind you that you had a chance. It reminds you that you didn't take it. All because hesitation held your hand, smiled at you, and convinced you that standing still was safer than stepping into the life you were meant to claim. It's strange, isn't it? How people believe that if they close their eyes tight enough, the danger disappears. They act like life is some obedient little servant that waits for them to feel ready. Like problems dissolve just because they refuse to look at them. They pretend ignorance is a shield, when really, it's gasoline poured over a fire they'll eventually have to walk through. Warning signs are never subtle, not really. They just become easy to ignore when ignoring them feels more comfortable than admitting what's happening. Maybe it starts with a feeling, a heaviness in your chest, a tension in your gut, a thought you keep pushing away. Or maybe it shows up in your life, in the people you trust, the situations you cling to, the choices you pretend don't matter. The signs are always there, glowing like neon lights. But you convince yourself they're harmless, temporary, or just in your imagination. People don't ignore warning signs because they don't see them. They ignore them because seeing them means changing something. And change, that's the thing everyone fears. Change means stepping out of the comfort of the familiar chaos, facing truths you've been hiding from, letting go of things you weren't ready to lose. So, instead of dealing with the danger while it's still small, still manageable, still quiet, they turn their head and pretend everything is fine. But warning signs don't disappear just because you pretend they're not real. They wait. They grow. They sharpen. They shift from gentle nudges to heavy blows. The thing about life is, It keeps giving you signs until you're forced to acknowledge them. And the longer you ignore them, the more dramatic the consequences become. What begins as a whisper becomes a lesson. What begins as a lesson becomes a collapse. What begins as discomfort becomes destruction. And the saddest part, you always remember the first sign. Always. The moment things started to feel off. The moment you felt that tiny pulse of intuition, that spark of awareness. That moment returns later, not as a memory, but as a ghost that sits with you during the fallout. You'll hear yourself saying, I knew this was coming. I felt it. But by then, the damage is done, and your realization becomes another wound you have to carry. Ignoring warning signs doesn't save you from pain. It delivers you to a version of pain that's far harsher, far louder, far more unforgiving. It's like walking toward an edge with complete confidence. Not because the edge isn't real, but because you refuse to believe the ground could ever disappear beneath you. And then, one day, you fall. And the fall feels cruel, not because life betrayed you, but because you betrayed yourself by pretending the cracks weren't there. You ever notice how silence becomes heavier when something is wrong? You're laughing, talking, moving through your days, but somewhere inside you, deep, deep inside, something feels misaligned. You keep brushing it off, distracting yourself, telling yourself it's nothing. But the mind knows, the body knows, the heart knows. Warning signs don't hide, they echo. They grow louder the more you try to drown them out. What you ignore now, it doesn't fade away. It learns your patterns. It waits for your weakest moment. It becomes the storm you never prepared for. And when the collapse finally comes, it won't be gentle. It won't be polite. It won't apologize. It will hit you with every consequence you tried to outrun. And you'll cry not because of the pain itself, but because you'll realize you could have stopped it before it ever reached this point. People think the future collapses without warning. It never does. Something always cracks first. A sign, a feeling, a shift. And instead of examining it, you ignored it. Because facing it would have required strength, and ignoring it required nothing at all. But nothing is never free. Nothing becomes the bill you pay later with tears, regret, and sleepless nights. The things you pretend are harmless are often the very things designed to save you. Warning signs aren't obstacles, they're rescue attempts, silent ones, subtle ones. The last gentle push before life stops playing softly and forces you to confront what you tried to escape. And if you keep turning away, if you keep pretending the signs mean nothing, then one day you'll find yourself standing in the ruins of a life that could have been stronger, safer, better. All because you chose to ignore the very signs that were trying to protect you from exactly this moment. Almost amusing how people think time is gentle, how they believe life will warn them again and again with the same softness, the same patience, the same tone, as if the universe has nothing better to do than repeat itself while you close your eyes and hum loudly enough to drown out the truth. But what you ignore now doesn't stay quiet. It doesn't stay small. It doesn't stay harmless. It transforms into something far less forgiving. Something that doesn't tap your shoulder, it grabs you by the throat. The storm you're avoiding isn't fading. It's growing. Every time you pretend not to notice the signs, every time you convince yourself it's probably nothing, the storm becomes more confident. It gathers speed, gathers weight, gathers enough force to break you in all the places you thought were safe. You think you're escaping the problem by ignoring it, but really, you're feeding it. You're giving it space to evolve into its most destructive form. People love to act like problems have manners, like they'll knock gently, wait politely, and leave quietly if you don't answer. But storms don't knock. They crash through the walls you thought were strong enough to protect you. And the brutal irony is that the storm always gives you early warnings, the shift in the wind, the darkening skies, the uneasy, quiet, but people never take them seriously until the damage becomes impossible to ignore. What you ignore now becomes the thing that hurts you later. Not because life is cruel, but because life doesn't negotiate with denial. You can pretend you're fine. You can pretend everything is under control. You can pretend you don't see the cracks forming. But the truth doesn't care about your comfort. It doesn't soften itself to match your ability to handle it. It grows in whatever direction you leave unattended. And the thing about storms is, they know exactly when to hit. They wait for that moment, the moment you're tired, vulnerable, distracted, hopeful. They strike when you've finally convinced yourself that maybe things will magically fix themselves. That's when the reality you ignored shows up at full volume, tearing apart the illusions you worked so hard to maintain. A painful, poetic punishment for pretending the warning signs were optional. It's strange how the mind works. You feel the danger long before it arrives. Something inside you shifts, a sensation you can't explain, a heaviness that makes your thoughts slow down. But instead of listening, you brush it aside. You call it stress, paranoia, imagination. You label your own intuition as an inconvenience because it demands you face something you hoped would disappear if you ignored it long enough. But storms aren't shy. They don't care about your timing or your excuses. They don't ask if you're ready. They don't wait for you to gather courage. They appear the moment you've given them enough space to form. And once they arrive, they don't leave until they've taken what they came for: your peace, your stability, your sense of control. And afterwards, when the damage is done, that's when the realization hits hardest. You look back at all the warnings you brushed off, all the moments you felt uneasy, all the signs that were practically screaming the truth while you tried your best to convince yourself everything was normal. And that's when the storm feels cruel, not because it arrived, but because you know deep inside that you handed it the invitation. The tears that follow aren't just from pain. They come from recognition. Recognition that you could have stopped this. Recognition that you saw it coming. Recognition that the disaster wasn't sudden, you just refused to believe the early signs. You can't outrun a storm you helped create. You can't escape consequences you willingly ignored. You can't claim surprise when the very thing you avoided becomes the thing that destroys the parts of your life you thought were untouchable. What you ignore now becomes the storm later. A storm that doesn't whisper, doesn't warn, doesn't wait. A storm that arrives with the full weight of every missed sign, every denied truth, every moment you convinced yourself you had more time. And when it hits, it won't be subtle, it won't be gentle, it won't be kind. It will simply be the result of everything you refused to see when the signs were still small enough to face and the consequences still soft enough to survive.